Hello, welcome to Apex Math. This lesson will be our second lesson on exponents. And in our previous lesson, we looked at the idea of multiplying variables that had exponents, and we learned that when we had the same base, we would add the exponents and when they sat next to each other. And in this case, if we had an exponent raised to an exponent, that we would be multiplying the exponents. We also talked about the difference of a negative in front of a value when it's in parentheses versus when it's not in parentheses. And we talked about how in this case that the square attaches itself only to the thing immediately in front of it. So this is negative 2 squared, so that's negative 4, while in this case it's negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 4. So that's a quick review of the concepts that we covered last time. We went into more detail, but we're going to move on from there. This time we're going to look at dividing with some exponents. And let's say we have x to the 5th over x squared. So that means we have 5 x's on top, 3, 4, 5, and we have 2 x's on the bottom. So anytime we have something over itself, for instance 5 over 5, remember that's just the value of 1. So for each opportunity here where we have an x over an x, that's just the value of 1. So essentially we can cross this out because those are just 1. So this leaves us with x to the 3rd. So let's look at a different example. Let's say it's reversed now, and we have x to the squared on top and x to the 5th on the bottom. So we have 2 x's on top and 5 x's on the bottom. It's the same concept here, where the x over x's cross right off. And remember, these just form 1s. So essentially we're left with a 1 on top because we can't have nothing on the top of a fraction. So we're left with a 1 on there, and so this is equal to 1 over x to the 3rd. Now the shortcut for doing this, let's look at that again, x to the 5th over x squared, and we had x squared over x to the 5th. The shortcut is to subtract exponents. Remember, when the exponents sat next to each other, like this, we added the exponents. So in the case of multiplication, we added exponents, and in the case of division, we're going to subtract exponents. Now, when the bigger number is on top and the little number is on the bottom, it becomes really simple. It's just x to the 5 minus 2, which is x to the 3rd. Which is what we saw when we crossed off our x's. But in this case, you can see that the bigger number is on the bottom. So I still like to do 5 minus 2, and I get 3. But I have to remember that the x to the 3rd is actually going to stay on the bottom because that's where the large number of x's were. So I'm going to have a 1 over x to the 3rd. So because there were more x's on the bottom, I know that the leftover x's have to stay on the bottom. While on the other problem up here, you can see the leftover x's stayed on top, so we no longer needed a fraction. So let's give you a couple of those to try. Let's say we have x to the 7th over x to the 4th, and then let's do x squared over x to the 8th. And pause your video for a second and tell me what those two problems equal. Okay, so in this case, the bigger number is on top, so we know that our answer doesn't need to be a fraction because all the leftovers are going to be on top. So it's going to be x to the 7 minus 4, which is x to the third, and I'm done. In this case, the bigger number is on the bottom. So I'm going to do 8 minus 2, and I'm going to get 6, but it's going to be 1 over x to the 6th because the extras are all going to stay on the bottom. All right, so let's add some numbers in now. Let's say we have 5x to the 4th over 10x to the 7th. So in this case, we have two things to deal with now. We have numbers and we have variables. And each number, all the numbers get dealt with together, and each variable with the same base gets dealt with together. So 5 over 10, we just pretend that's a regular fraction and we simplify it. So 5/10, if we had to reduce that, what would that reduce to? That would reduce to 1/2. So I simply reduce that and leave that on my fraction bar in reduced form as 1 over 2. Next, I go to my x's here, and I see that I have a 7, and the bigger number's on the bottom, so my leftovers are going to be on the bottom. So I do 7 minus 4, and I get 3, so I have x to the third. So I end up with 1 over 2x to the third. So let's do 2x squared x to the 4th over 6x to the 10th. And let's see what that simplifies to. So the first thing is to deal with what we did in our last lesson, which is we're going to put the little 1 on the 2, and we're going to distribute this 2 here to each of these. So we're going to have 2, it's a power to a power, so we multiply, x, 2 times 2, and x to the 4th, over 6x to the 10th. Now we still need to simplify, so up top here, this is going to simplify to 2 squared, which is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And remember, these two are sitting right next to each other. They each have their own base, so the rule is to add their exponents. So that becomes x to the 8th. Down here, we have 6x to the 10th. Now, we need to regroup again and look at numbers and variables. So we have 4/6. So 4/6, what does that simplify to? Well, 2 goes into both of those. So 2 goes into 4 twice, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. So this becomes a 2 and a 3. And the 8 and the 10, they're both x's. So we're going to do 10 minus 8, and we get 2. The bigger number's on the bottom, so the leftovers stay down here. So I end up with 2 over 3x squared. All right, we're going to give you one to try, and that's how we're going to end our session for today. So let's do 5x squared y squared times x to the 4th y over 10 x to the 3rd times y squared to the 3rd. All right, pause your video and let's see how you do. All right, I didn't leave myself a whole lot of room to write this, so we're going to try to fit this on here. So I'm going to put a 1 on my 5 and a 1 on my y, and I'm going to distribute this to the 3 numbers here. So I have 5 to the 1 times 2, which is 2, x to the 2 times 2, which is 4, and y to the 1 times 2, which is 2, and I already had an x to the 4th and a y to the 1. So that's what I have on top. Down below, I have a 10, an x to the 3rd, and I'm going to distribute this power to a power, so I'm going to multiply and get y to the 6th. Now up top, I'm going to combine my x's together first. So I'm going to combine these two, and notice they both have a base and they're sitting side by side, so I'm going to go ahead and add the exponents. So I'm going to get 5 squared. Let's go ahead and do that. It's 25. X to the 4 plus 4 is 8. Next, I'm going to do my y, and let's get a different color here. So y, I have y squared and y to the 1. So that's y to the 3rd. I add the exponents, and I'm going to put this over. I don't need to do any more simplifying down here. 10 x to the 3rd, y to the 6th. Okay, now I start with my numbers. 25 and 10. 5 goes into both of those. So 5 goes into 25 5 times. 5 goes into 10 twice. So 5 and 2. Then I have x and x, so we're going to combine these two. X to the 8 and 3. So I'm going to do 8 minus 3 is 5. The bigger number's on top, so the x is going to stay on top. Then I'm going to do my y's. I have a y to the 3 and a y to the 6. So I'm going to do 6 minus 3, but the bigger number's on the bottom, so the remainder has to stay on the bottom. So I get y to the 3rd. So my final answer is 5x to the 5th over 2y to the 3rd. Hopefully you got that right. And thank you very much for visiting us at Apex Math. And we will continue working on exponents with a 3rd lesson. And we will begin to work on negative exponents in our next lesson. So be sure to come visit us for that. Negative exponents coming soon.